The water topic there, really fascinating. I'm sure you guys thought so. I know I geek out on it. It is definitely a big reason why Chandler's had a lot of success, because of thinking ahead on a lot of these water topics. And then when we do have these larger water users come in from our side, so like industrial manufacturers, we have a plan in place to make sure that they meet certain requirements. If they go above that, then we can approve more water, because we've set aside that water, which has been really important for us to make sure we can go after and help companies like Intel expand, which without having those water planning and purchasing those water rights and making sure we have enough for the whole city, we wouldn't be able to do it. So that was great. I really enjoyed hearing that, and yeah, it goes really deep into the weeds, and you can tell how it's a difficult topic for the media to cover as well, because you can write one article, it doesn't really give you a big scope of what's going on. So I'm here to talk about economic development, and please, for my presentation, if there's questions that come up while you're thinking of it on the slide, just jump in. I want to cover topics that you guys are interested in. I've been with the city almost 10 years. There's a lot going on. Some groups are more interested in certain areas of economic development or others. The deck will pretty much go through some demographics, highlights at the beginning, and then we'll jump into the companies that are coming in and the commercial real estate categories. So we'll just get going here. First off, Chandler, where are we at? Most of you all are very familiar with where we're at, but just to show you here where the freeways are, very important for Chandler. 3 freeways, a 4th freeway just 1.5 miles to the north with US 60. Mesa Gateway's expansion is helping Chandler as well as we continue to become more centralized and directly in between both of the freeways. National awards, these are just a highlight, but they really point to Chandler being a great place to live, a great place for companies to come and growth. And once again, too, for these slides as well, if it's easier for you guys, it's more than happy to send these out, so you can be on the PDF, you can look at this in more detail, and there's a lot of information. AAA bond rating, this is a big one. We tell almost every company we're talking to, Chandler's one of only 40 cities throughout the entire country with a AAA bond rating from each rating agency. What does that mean? That means that when we're taking out bonds to pay for this water infrastructure and expansion, and also one thing she didn't touch on is a lot of these pipes, just like every city, they start to get old. We have to invest in them. And when we take out those loans, those bonds, we're able to get the lowest interest rates, which then saves our taxpayers money, because then they don't have to pay as high taxes. So that's come with great financial planning and making the right investments in the cities, in our city, compared to maybe what some of the other cities are doing. Population and average age, so we are still a couple years younger than the region on our average age. The entire region continues to get older, and that's happening throughout the country as well. But companies like this information over here, it's a really even breakdown between the different brackets. So when companies are coming in, they can hire entry-level employees, mid-level, upper-level. Increase in housing prices is becoming a challenge, as we all know. So we're watching that closely and trying to build as much density where we can, so we can still allow those younger workers to keep coming here and have a place that's affordable. That's a big topic. Education rates. These numbers, look at them here, they look pretty impressive. They're very impressive. The bachelor's degree or higher. So 48% compared to the state overall at 34%. I mean, that's a good 30-40% higher. And since I've been with the city, when I first started, we were at 38%, and we were in Arizona at the time was around 32. So we've continued to get more educated, and that's the snowball effect you like to see, and that's where you see the companies clustering together that are more in the high-tech area. So the educated workforce that we have here is absolutely huge for the companies and the type of companies that are looking to come here. And you can see how it translated to our average incomes. Kind of dovetailing on that topic, our education. It's really top in the state for K through 12. So Chandler Unified has been ranked either first, second, or third in the state, according to niche.com, which is one of the rating agencies. Obviously, ratings aren't perfect, but they're one of the most recognized websites. First, second, or third in the state for several years. And it's also, Chandler Unified is one of the biggest school districts. You can see STEM is a big focus. That really translates from the companies that are here, and then them making sure that's an emphasis for the kids and for the schools. And then it's not just our traditional public schools, but also our charter schools. BASIS is ranked nationally. Latest ranking was 30th. There's been times where they've been as high as 10th, but even just being in that ballpark, it's top school in the country. And then even Great Hearts SAT scores 200 plus points higher than average. So great numbers, and you can see it out there, and throughout the region. Just the reputation of our schools is very important. Recreation activities. So almost one city park per square mile. That's been a focus of the city council for decades, long before I got here. So anywhere you're at in the city, there'll be at least one park within a mile, usually 2 or 3. So we put investment there as opposed to maybe in stadiums or other types of activities. That's where Chandler's focus has been. You look at the walking and biking trails, and this one's not just Chandler. We actually kind of saw some other cities doing this, and then it got good feedback, and we implemented it to put investment in those trails. The canals were kind of forgotten and not looked at and just sort of ignored. But we've made that into an amenity. Our pools and aquatic centers, this is an innovative thing we did. It's not rocket science, but a lot of cities don't do it. We split the costs with Chandler Unified, so the school can use it, and they're open to the public, and then we split the costs, so it saves both of us money. Other cities are trying to do that now as well. Obviously, golf courses, we have some. A lot of them are in other areas just around us. And then, kind of the amenities of why people want to come to Chandler, just the residents and the businesses. Great retail. And the strategy for Chandler when it comes to retail and like what we do, a lot of people think the economic developers are just focusing on bringing in new restaurants and retail all the time. We actually do not prioritize that in our department. We focus on bringing in the good jobs with high disposable incomes, and when you do that, then the retail comes with it. So you'll see some other cities that are putting a lot of effort into outreaching to these really unique restaurants, and they'll maybe get a conversation, but when those restaurants are looking at is there enough income to support them, they don't come. Whereas you see with Chandler, the East Valley overall, the type of employment out here has supported that, and you have a lot more unique restaurants, retail. One of them, one thing I'll say is on some of the unique concepts, we do put efforts in to recruit them, because then it kind of also then helps bring the employers in, and it makes a big impact for our residents. One of those examples is the Shields that's opening at the mall. We're super excited about this. The grand opening is in a month from now. So this is the former vacant department store space. They actually expanded upon it. And it's the description I've heard that is the easiest way to describe it, because I've never been to one. They're mostly in the Midwest. It's like a Dick's Sporting Goods and then like a Bass Pro Shop combined. And it's going to be a place with like indoor Ferris wheel, big fish tank. It's going to be a place like cool to hang out for those that don't love shopping like me. Maybe I'll just go hang out. The girlfriend can shop if she wants. And so it'll be something that's one thing that we've seen a transition in the retail area, is that people want to not just go to buy things, but also experiences, gyms, etc. I've got another retail slide here in a little bit, but that's been a trend that's really helped Chandler. If you guys remember, about 10 years ago, there was a bunch of vacant big box space throughout Chandler, and almost all of those are filled now. A lot of those have filled with gyms, bounce houses, etc. And so our retail right now is really strong, which I got another slide on that in a minute, but the Shields is going to be a huge addition for us. We still have one vacant department store space there, but we're really excited for that, and we want to stay on top of the mall. You can see what happens to other malls when they start kind of going down a declining path. luckily Chandler's Mall, Scottsdale's Mall are doing great, and we're putting a lot of focus to make sure that we're staying on top of the trends there. So 2 slides here. These are some of our most exciting announcements, and this is where we spend most of our effort, is recruiting companies to Chandler. And I think the main thing to see here is the diverse amount of industries that we're bringing here. And one thing I would add too is we are super thrilled about Intel's growth here, and we help facilitate that, and we have a great relationship with them. But our department, meanwhile, has been putting in a lot of effort into recruiting diverse industries once again, so that if any one industry goes up or down, right now semiconductor has been like this for several years, as we know, but we want to make sure that we have these other industries, so if there are any type of downturn or one specific industry has issues, that our residents here have multiple different types of companies to work for. So these are just a snapshot here. I got one more slide after this of another 8 companies. Have you guys seen any of these announcements? Do you have any questions on these or what they do? I can give you more detail on any of them if it's of interest. Yeah.
Intel, they've been expanding, but I heard they're moving very slowly, not according to the original schedule. Is that true or not?
The main news article that I'm assuming that you saw, and that is actually their competitor, TSMC.
Yeah.
So TSMC is going up in North Phoenix, and they're the ones that recently had the announcement a few weeks ago that they're having struggles with workforce, and they pushed back their open date by a year.
Right.
There hasn't been any announcement on Intel as of now for that.
Is this due 2024?
There's no date out there. If you notice, if you look at the news articles, they will not tell you exactly when they're opening. They won't tell us exactly. They keep that close to the vest for competitive reasons. I think somewhere in that ballpark is probably accurate based on where we see the status of construction, but they have not said anything publicly, and they won't on exactly when they open.
There was an article 6 months ago saying 2024, so my clients, I'll wait to sell my house until early 2024, so the price will go up. Who knows?
Intel's struggling, just so you know, a little bit. My husband doesn't have to work for them, and he retired from there. Mm-hmm. They're struggling a little bit financially. Mm-hmm. So it's probably why they kind of pulled back a little bit on the manufacturing.
Yeah, we're reading all the articles too. There's a lot of different thoughts, and there's certain people that Intel will say one thing, certain people that'll say another thing. But yeah, they are in a very strong competition with TSMC. TSMC has been a little bit ahead on their manufacturing process, but Intel has doubled down on their manufacturing here in Chandler.
Yeah.
This is the first time they're not just building one new fab, they're building 2. $20 billion investment. And so their latest CEO has made the pivot to actually focus on manufacturing even more. There was talk about maybe they're going to have some other semiconductor companies do some of the manufacturing for them. They've reversed course on that and said, we're doing all of our manufacturing, number 1, and number 2, we're also going to create foundries to manufacture for other semiconductor companies. So, and a lot of that will take place in Chandler.
And so because we see mostly manufacturing as the type of industry that all of these are seem to be representing, they provide jobs that rate at the level that you're saying where there's the most disposable income that these families can.
Yeah, generally yes, but that summary doesn't always apply. There are a lot of manufacturers. So we see like the leads that come into the Phoenix Metro, and they consider all the cities. There's certain types of manufacturing, like food manufacturing, that's very low paying. And those are the type of projects we actually don't go after because, as was mentioned earlier, we're 93% built out. That's the number right now. We have 7% of our land left. And so we're being very particular, and we are fortunate to be able to do that, to go after the type of companies that, number 1, have a density of jobs. So for example, data centers do not have a big density of jobs, and we are not actively going after those at all. We're to the opposite. But also then, not just density of jobs, but the average salaries. So like a food manufacturer, generally those type of salaries are going to be maybe at the median average countywide, $40,000, $50,000 a year. And that generally is difficult to afford the housing cost of living in Chandler. So we're going after like the Strikers, the Intels, the NXPs, those higher end manufacturers that require more skill. Those are the type of manufacturers we go after. But then to compare it slightly even more, manufacturing is almost always better than like warehouse distribution jobs. And those are the other types of jobs that we're not actively trying to recruit to Chandler. We're still getting some of them, and we still will, because some of those operations are needed, but we're putting our recruitment efforts, and the companies we're reaching out to are those manufacturers that are more higher end.
If we're so focused on manufacturing, could the U.S. government way down the line have a negative impact like they have before? You know, we have had situations where a lot of manufacturing jobs went outside the country or elsewhere.
And so your question is?
Are we protected in some ways? So much manufacturing went into Chandler.
So I see where the angle of your question is. The main thing is, you know, just looking at Chandler specifically, if we're able to recruit a company that comes here, they purchase a building, they make millions of dollars of capital investment, the chance of them leaving is much lower. So because they've already made that investment here. If you're looking at the big macro picture, you're right, there has been some flows outward of manufacturing in recent years, especially since COVID, more manufacturing, not just for the US, but other countries too. They're trying to make sure that they have enough of that supply chain in their own country for supply chain, national security risks, etc.
So you think, okay, so this is about the Chips and Safety Act, is kind of what you're talking about?
That's part of it. That's just related to like semiconductors.
Okay.
So that is
some amount of what we have.
Yeah, it's a large part. But if you look here, let me flip to the next slide too. About half of those companies are not semiconductor. Northrop Grumman, National Defense. Looking here, Virtra, they actually make a really cool company. They do virtual reality screens for police officers and military to practice in difficult situations, so they're more prepared. That's not semiconductor. Best Way, this is outdoor equipment, not semiconductor. And Insight, I'll mention them briefly. And there is kind of this focus on manufacturing because we're very proud of them, but one thing I'll add, just to show some diversity, our second and third largest employers in Chandler are not manufacturing. It's Wells Fargo and then Bank of America. So the numbers are Intel's at 12,000 employees, Wells Fargo 5,500, and then Bank of America 3,800. So we have large campuses for two of the largest banks in the country that have not only opened those campuses, but they're continuing to grow them. And also, too, another topic that's of big interest to us is the return to the office, and we're watching that closely. You are seeing at Wells Fargo and B of A that they're bringing more employees back. So within manufacturing, we're trying to make sure we have diverse types of manufacturing because there's many industries, but then also financial services, healthcare, software. Those are other areas that we're trying to recruit to. So we're not just all in the manufacturing bucket or all in the semiconductor manufacturing bucket. Yeah.
I was also going to say, to add to your point, Chandler has the IT corridor along Price Road, which is a high concentration of not just manufacturing, but also R&D and DoD contract type companies. Those kind of jobs do not go to China. The kind of jobs that go to China are the low skill, low wage jobs. So Chandler has been able to attract a lot of high income, high knowledge, human resource into the area. So we shouldn't be afraid of losing that. Right. Unless, of course, we have a recession or something else happen to us. Right,
yeah, I think that's a good point. And just to talk to our employment corridors a little bit, because I think that would be interesting, is one of the areas that economic development is focused on with this fairly limited remaining land is making sure that we don't have residential encroachment on those employment corridors. So like Price Corridor, for example, which we're all familiar with, it could have built with residential 30, 40 years ago. There were developers knocking on the door, but city council, executive leadership within the city helped push back on some of those residential developers to to make sure, we realize that there's not the interest in manufacturers, financial services companies coming in there 30 years ago. But then as the residential continued to build in other areas of the city where we had planned for it, and then they built also residential east of us in other communities, then all of a sudden the timing is right for those companies to build those large campuses. But it's only because the city of Chandler held steady on those employment corridors and didn't rezone the land. And I know that was a topic earlier, and rezoning, those processes are very important on a case-by-case basis to kind of stick with the plan and make sure that you're able to land these companies. So I'll keep moving on, and we'll go to, got a couple of the categories here which may be interest to you guys, because I know the real estate expertise here. So this is the three main commercial real estate categories where we're at in Chandler. I think the interesting thing that you probably see that jumps out at you is the under construction, the difference between office and industrial. So there's a total dichotomy taking place between those two areas since COVID. And it goes back to the topic we just discussed about return to the office. So there's basically no office construction happening in Chandler. There's 16,000 square feet. I think it's a small medical office building. But we've been on a very strong industrial market the last few years. Continues to be very strong. Actually, this is towards the high end of under construction. We had a lot of space filled up a year ago. But this is the one area we're watching closely, is where those office numbers are at, and making sure we're working hard on any and all of those office leads to try to fill up our office buildings, because it has been slow. Retail, jump to this next one on office. It has been slow on companies, especially some of the larger companies, bringing employees back, and that is a challenge for us with those amenities that are around there, activating it, etc. The positive side is that you're seeing developers realize this, so we're not adding more space, we're not adding more glut to the market, and the vacancy rates, you can see they're at the high of the 5-year. So this is an area that we're focused on. It is a challenging market at the moment. We continue to see some of our companies come back. Once again, Wells Fargo and B of A coming back, at least hybrid is very big to start a trend there. And so we're going to be working on this. It's going to take time, the next few years. It's not going to be any quick change on this, but we're trying to keep our office buildings as activated as possible. I would say that our vacancy rates are holding up well against the rest of the region, so we're a couple percentage points lower. So we're not higher than the region, we're actually doing better. But we do have a lot of space, and we're focused on this at a high amount. To go back to the retail slide, this is an area where, during COVID, if you would have told me our vacancy rates are at this, I would have said you're crazy. So this has been really impressive to see where the retail market has went. This only shows about 6 years. If you go back 10 years, we're at 10-year lows. Like, who would have guessed that when everyone was freaking out about all the restaurants closing, small businesses, etc. Here in Chandler, we haven't had much construction. We thought that maybe some of the retail would need to go away, and in certain cases that may still need to happen, but overall our retail is really strong. Also about a point or two lower than the region. But what we would say is this points to, number one, our strong demographics and disposable incomes, and then also some trends and some shift in the retail market where the space isn't always getting filled now by people coming in just to spend money on a good, but then more so on services, gyms, bounce houses, shields, etc. So this has been really encouraging to see. And then industrial has been really strong. And this is where the manufacturers are going, once again, focusing not on trying to recruit warehouse distribution jobs, which you're seeing in some other parts of the region. We're focused on more, not just manufacturing. The other one we haven't mentioned is also R&D. So those research and development jobs, which we have a fair amount in Chandler, those are almost always highly educated positions. So you can see our vacancy rate here, 3%. That's close to zero, because there's always going to be leases that are expiring, a little bit of churn. At one point, we were actually as low as 1% on our vacancy rate, which was just wild. Since then, we've had a lot more construction starting to take place because obviously the market has been strong enough for it. So I would expect that to jump up a couple points when a lot of this space finishes, but then we'll be working to try to get that filled. And as of now, the market continues to be really strong. Just a few more slides here. Here's our employment corridors. Just for a picture, everyone has heard of the Price Corridor, but Air Park areas where a lot of activity's been lately. It's where some of the larger pieces of land are outside of Price Corridor. So you're going to see that job count for the Air Park area continue to increase. We're really excited about that. So that area has gotten a lot of interest. And then both West Chandler and Uptown Chandler, we've put a lot of efforts internally into some branding campaigns and reinvesting in what for us is an older area, but most communities is still relatively younger, but we want to stay on top of those areas of the community to make sure they're getting attention. And one of the positives about those corridors is small businesses, medium-sized businesses can get leases and purchase buildings for more affordable rates. So it really helps them as they're starting up, and then maybe they decide they want to move to Price Corridor or Air Park area 5-10 years down the road, but there is more affordable real estate in those areas, and they're very important to us as well. So two slides here on kind of a shift that Chandler's seeing as we talk again about the limited amount of land. So Chandler's moving into an infill redevelopment phase for a lot of our projects. We've realized this for years. It's starting to happen now. And so with that, we're trying to add flexibility for groups that are coming in that might not meet the parking ratio. There might be equipment on the top of the building that doesn't meet code. We have already added flexibility on certain older areas of the city to try to make sure we get those buildings filled. We don't want to have requirements that are so difficult to meet, and then companies can never come in, and then that building remains vacant. That can snowball. We don't want to do that. So we've added some flexibility there. And then just the second slide here, talking again about the infill and redevelopment. This is already happening. A good example is you look at Alma School and Chandler Boulevard. If you're familiar with that new apartment complex that's going in, it was actually a tear down. It's just north of the Safeway there, just northwest of it. There was actually an old garden style office building that was there, and that was torn down. There was a little bit of vacant land to the south, and then they put up 300 plus units of multifamily. We see that as a big win because that office building was very antiquated, wasn't going to recruit the type of companies we're looking for there. It was 50% vacant, and if we can get residential there, additional units to support our other employers, that's a win, and that's also using land that was already built upon and then moving to another use. That can only happen once the market reaches the point where they can afford the demo costs on top of development, but you're starting to see that happening in Chandler. And it adds challenges for the city on some of the infrastructure requirements and meeting parking, etc. But that's where we're trying to add flexibility, and we're being open to those type of projects because we know they're going to be important for some of these older areas of the community.
Well, now that you mentioned the apartment complexes, do you have a development stat on your multifamily where you've been and where you're going forward? We're seeing a lot of those coming in.
Yeah.
How many more do you plan on building, and what's the plans around that?
Yeah, for sure. And I have a couple slides. I didn't have them in this deck, but I can include them and send them if you're interested to see those. We understand multifamily is a big topic, and in certain areas of the community, it doesn't make sense. So generally speaking, where we're looking for multifamily going forward is near the freeways, and then in the older areas of the community. So Uptown Chandler, West Chandler, maybe around the mall where we can add density and keep South Chandler primarily single family focus. There's been a few projects that were approved in the past. It seems like now once again, this is not really a staff decision, this is a city council, but generally speaking, they have been focused on the multifamily being near the freeways and kind of in those older areas of the community. But those decisions are ultimately made then by the city council. But that's been the main focus. And we do have some information on like where those developments are going, which I can send, and then you guys can look through it. It's kind of interesting information.
Are those all going to be apartments, or do you have any condos or townhomes for sale coming up? Because I know like Scottsdale has just all apartments coming.
Yeah, great question. So the market has really changed in the last 10 years, where almost all of the multifamily developments in the East Valley have been for rent. And then you also see too, the terminology is changing, which is a little frustrating. I think you see like townhomes coming in, but they're for rent. So that whole definition's changed a little bit. There's a lot of market reasons on why the rental product is easier financially for the developers to build than condos and townhouses. It's a long topic, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. But we would like to see more townhouses and condos, more for purchase. But that's where the private sector capital is deploying money at this point, is for mostly the rental units. I would expect, Scottsdale's kind of had this higher end income earners for a long time, and has built up the reputation where then it seems like they've been able to develop more of those for sale units. Just kind of that product category has had a longer history. But I would expect that Chandler would have more of that down the road, just as people realize how much money is out here in the East Valley, and that there are the incomes to support it. But to answer your question, as of now, there's not that many larger developments for sale multifamily that I've seen approved.
Couldn't Chandler offer some financial incentives to make it easier to build condos than apartments? Because, we have a need, a huge need for condos, not only realtors to sell them, but
right?
We want them instead of apartments.
Yeah, I hear your point, and I, myself, I think a lot of people within the city would like to see more of the for sale units. Our regulatory authority on condos for sale versus apartments, we don't have that. So where we can approve new developments is purely on the density and the look of the developments. So whether it's for sale or for rent, the city doesn't control that. That's decided by the private developers. There's no specific incentives that we're allowed to give one type of developer versus another. We have to keep it even across the board. And so on like the zoning topic, when those type of like apartment or condo developments come to the city, the only thing that the city can do is approve, hey, are these too many units with not enough parking, too much density, where we have in the general plan, like certain parcels can have this many units per acre. We have regulatory authority over that. Ultimately, it's decided by the city council, but we do not have the ability to tell them this is for rent or for sale. You're only allowed to do one or the other. State law does not allow us to do that.
So zoning's the same, right?
Right, so it would require a change in state law.
Yeah, which I've not heard kind of any movement towards that. Oh wait, I think she was first.
Well, on that subject, this is just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like the reason a lot of these companies are coming in building apartments is because you have no rent control. So they're able to make like lots of money over a period of time without concern. California doesn't do that. They do have rent control, even though the pricing is high, obviously. But it seems to me if the city considered more of rent control, you probably would actually find some opportunity for the condos and townhomes.
Yeah.
Because there's just, they just couldn't charge whatever they wanted to at any particular time.
Yeah, and that's totally a political topic that's left to like elected officials.
And we're recording.
Are those type of conversations even coming up? Because you said we don't have any control, but if there is a political layer there, why aren't we having those conversations?
Yeah, I think the area where rent control is really not come up too much. Yeah, you can see a lot of the states where it occurs is usually the highest housing prices are there. Where there has been some topics that are, there's debate on as well is some of these affordable living developments that get federal grants that help the developer then offer rents that are lower. And so that has pushback on, on certain sides, but then there are supporters. That is, once again, there's been some projects that have looked at Chandler on that. There's been more so projects in some other areas of the region, but it's kind of always like a, cat and mouse. They're kind of like a tug back and forth on, what the residents want on those type of developments. So it's, ultimately the elected officials decide.
Doesn't it seem a bit like a contradiction that while your development is looking for more people, workforce with disposable income, we're not offering them a place to buy? This seems odd.
Yeah, you're saying like there's not enough units out there.
Because who would rent if they can buy?
Right. Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind about Chandler, again, we keep going back to it, is 7% of our land left. There's only a percentage or two of that that will be single-family housing. So of that remaining 7%, more than half of it is zoned for employment-based uses. So there's just simply not the land left for the traditional single-family for-sale units. Where you're going to see most of the units come in the future is on the multifamily side. Now, whether it's for-sale condos or for-rent apartments is ultimately decided by the developers that come in, and then doing their research to see which area they think they can make more money and that is the safer investment. But you will not see that many new single-family houses, which is where traditionally for-sale units are, just because most of those subdivisions are fully built out.
So what you're kind of creating is a commute.
Unless they're for rent. I mean, there's a lot of these units are for rent, and those are residents too. And so a lot of them are wanting to move to those apartments because they want to be close to all the employment that's here. And a lot of those apartment developers build specifically looking at where the jobs are. That's why you've seen not just Chandler, but Gilbert, even Queen Creek's getting some now, Mesa, Tempe, all of the apartment development, Scottsdale, because there are the higher density of jobs in those areas, and the residents, it's the trade-off.
So the 7% undivided land, are those privately owned land or Chandler owned land?
Good question. Almost all privately owned. We have a few pieces of city land, but the vast majority, 98%-ish, is privately owned.
They're already zoned, right? Already zoned for certain developments. For sure, there's no more single family community left.
No large ones. There's going to be like 10, 30 unit developments in little pockets that will be built, but none of the 200, 300, 400 unit type developments.
And no water issue either, because she mentioned that all the water has been reallocated to
Yeah, Chandler has enough water for our build out and some extra on top.
For how long? 100 years?
Yeah, 100 year supply.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Ryan, I just want to say it is 11:30, so just
Yeah.
to respect everybody's time, I don't know if you want to get through a slide or keep
Oh
the
yeah, I
questions.
think that was just about the end.
And I'm going to fix this for the next class, for gosh
Yeah.
sakes. The sleep mode and
So I'll just say
Making
this
me
is the final slide. The main thing for us is once again bringing companies in. So if you guys know people, I know it's mostly residential here, but if there is like a small business, somebody that needs help finding a location, needs help with permitting, Chandler's focus is on being a business-friendly community, and that's where our team can help guide them through. Usually the larger companies have expertise on that, but our team is there to help them find a location and through the permitting process. And I'll send the deck over, and I love it. Great questions. Really enjoyed it.
Great job.
What's that?
Will we ever get a Trader Joe's?